Thank you for doing this, Robert.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Great to be here.
Yeah, and what a great venue. Uh,
Columbia Tower Club is a great place to entertain and a great place to see views of the city.
and can anybody become a member of Columbia Tower Club?
Yeah, it's not exclusive. In fact, it's become far more diverse last several years. A lot of difference in the board, but yeah, anybody can become a member.
And it's not just business. It's beyond just business you're talking about.
Beyond business, it's a social club. It's a place to do business, to meet other business people. But there's a lot of other things, a lot of charities and other things that go on here and events that go on here.
Yeah, yeah. And the way we'll go about this is kind of cover your three hats,
Yeah,
all three of them. And I know you're also called the king of networking,
yeah. The Godfather
the
of
Godfather.
networking.
Yeah,
Sometimes they say king, and I own it. And Godfather of networking is something that's been coined recently. I kind of like that one too.
nice, nice. And your Escalon role, your role in Startup Grind Seattle chapter as the director, and then also as the board member of Columbia Tower. And I know you do a little bit of philanthropy work also, so we'll touch a bit of
Yeah,
all of that, right? Now, how did this all start? Was it your own passion? Was it family?
yeah. It's a great question. I think if I look back, it started when I was a child. I mean, I always had a compassionate heart. Always loved diverse people. A lot of my heroes growing up were black, were the sports heroes initially, and then some music and that type of thing. So I've always had a diverse kind of spirit. My parents were immigrants from southern Italy, so I was first generation born here. Grew up with 7 children, so you grew up pretty social and in a big family like that, and then that morphed into my personality and my ability to meet people fairly easily and engage with them in conversation.
Where in Italy did they originally grow up from?
Yeah, so my mom's from Napoli,
Yeah,
and my father's on the other side of the Amalfi Coast, outside of a city called Salerno, but he was from the mountains called Postiglione.
got it. And so big soccer slash European football fans, I assume.
I grew up loving soccer. My dad was my first coach, and I then began to coach my sons as well. Now my sons are coaching their kids. But yeah, we love soccer. We have a lot all sports, but and especially local sports here. But soccer is our number one.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you talked about the social upbringing, growing up with siblings. How did that contribute, and your own Italian origins? How did that contribute to your networking skills, right?
Yeah, I think so because with a big family and also a lot of different ages, they would bring their friends in. So you're meeting people of different ages, younger and older, and I was kind of in the middle. So that was part of it. Then in the family dynamic, you're you know Italian families, especially even around meals, there's a lot of talking.
Yeah,
And my wife, when she first came to a family meal, she says, "Why is everyone yelling?" Oh no, we're not yelling. We're just very passionate about what we're talking about.
yeah.
So that ability to emote and to express was natural. It came and through the family, and then you also had to fight for attention. You
Yeah.
had to be a little more louder to get attention when you needed it. So yeah, I think all that plays a dynamic in your personality and how you eventually express yourself as an adult.
No, absolutely. And going back to your journey, right? How did you know of Startup Grind, and how did you become what you became, the chapter director?
Yeah, so being in the Seattle eco space with Escalon and other even prior to Escalon, just growing up, especially in Seattle, I know a lot of people. I'm connected to a lot of people. I've got 30,000 folks on my LinkedIn, which helps. And then people start identifying you, as someone who knows a lot of people, and then they want you involved. And in this case with Startup Grind, Robert Green, who is a new co-director there, asked if I would support building that chapter. And I looked at Startup Grind, and it looked like a wonderful way to bring in some entrepreneurs and bring in guest speakers every month that could give them some insight, give them some encouragement, and then while you're doing that, you're meeting new people along the way through the networking event.
And how often are these events?
So Startup Grind events are once a month, usually on a Tuesday or Thursday. They're not. We don't have a set date every month. And then I sponsor a few other events with other vendors and other partners of mine, like Perkins Coie and Fenwick and SVB and JP Morgan and others. So we do our own events as a partnership, and then I have the Startup Grinds every month.
Got it. And can anybody come to these events, or is it inclusive, exclusive? Are they free of cost? How does it work?
Yeah, great question. We did have a nominal fee, and I think we still do for Startup Grind. Most of the other ones, because we have sponsors, we do have sponsors at Startup Grind, so we keep the cost, if there is a cost, sometimes there are, very minimal. You get a drink, you get food, that kind of thing. The ones that I do with the others, like other bigger sponsors that I produce, we try to be really targeted in who we're inviting, and we don't charge anything because the sponsors are paying for it. Startup Grind, we're a little more broad in who we're inviting. It's kind of a broad invitation, so we sometimes have to take on a little bit more because it's not as targeted, and it might grow into a larger number than some of the other events.
How is you know how is Seattle responding, right, to all of these events? Because being from, I'm originally not from Seattle, but having lived here for 3 years, we always hear this term Seattle freeze.
Yeah.
And how does that play in the startup world, right?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's a great question. I've heard of the Seattle freeze a lot, and even when I was a kid, I grew up mostly in Bellevue on the east side of Seattle, and I'd hear people from other parts of Seattle, and they wouldn't call it the Seattle freeze. They would just said, "Oh, you guys are, you East Siders are, uppity," and I never felt that. I don't know, maybe there was an attitude from some of the folks that had more than the others in other parts of the city, but we didn't grow up that way. So, but I heard that, and then I started hearing about the Seattle freeze. There's probably something to it. I've heard that from business folks. They come in and they're out of town, and in Seattle, it takes a little bit longer to probably break in because people want to work with people they know, and it's a little bit more that way, it seems like, in Seattle than maybe other cities like New York or Los Angeles. I don't know. If you're coming from the South, it's quite a bit of a freeze because the South, everyone sits on their porch and waves to everybody. My wife's from that area, so yeah, it's a little bit different for some people coming to Seattle, but I like to think we're pretty friendly.
No, yeah, I mean, I mentioned Seattle freeze, but on the flip side, and I believe that making closer connections is a lot more easier in Seattle compared to other big cities because the geography is pretty small. And I was doing a podcast last week with somebody, and they mentioned that people in Seattle want to root for your success a lot more than you know other big cities, right? Did you also feel something similar?
Yeah, there is a more of a support from folks to cheer you on in what you're doing. In fact, one of the VCs locally mentioned that Seattle founders in general are a lot more humble, a lot more approachable, and versus maybe the Bay Area. But it was interesting. They also said on the other side, the Bay Area founders are a little more aggressive, a little more ready to embellish what they're selling, and they get funded better. Besides the fact there's a lot more money in San Francisco, that's for VC, for venture funding. But Seattle's got a lot of money. It just hasn't. the spout for venture funding hasn't clicked in. We just had an event with San Francisco VCs meet the Seattle VCs, and we talked about Seattle being it's a tech. Everyone knows it's a tech hub. It's we've got probably if not number one, number two of the best talent in the world, really in this region. And but yet we're like number 8 or 9 in venture funding.
Yeah, yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit more on that. How can we move from 8 or 9 to 3 or 4? Right? What do you think has to change from from your perspective?
I think there's more a new generation of investors and folks that are willing to see potential. I think AI is going to start opening doors for those early stage companies to be funded. Obviously, a lot must be a lot of the investment in Seattle has been going to some of these bigger companies, like Amazon that are here locally, or Microsoft or Google, or some of these other ones. But I think we're seeing now after the downfall for the last few years, things are starting to pick up. So venture funding's on the rise. We're seeing some trends, but I think it's just going to be more and more about us presenting the value that and founders being able to present the value that they're bringing to the investment community.
Yeah, in a way, isn't it good, right? You have these massive companies here, even if they're taking most of the funding right now, but then, like in the manufacturing industry, there's something called ancillary industries, right? They feed other smaller companies. So do you think that some of these bigger ones can actually feed other smaller companies? And uh, also, most of these companies are very global in nature, and that is something that I don't know if the average Seattle person knows, but if you look at Amazon, for example, or Microsoft, for example, their largest office outside the US is in my home city, Hyderabad. And even Boeing, right, big presence in the area, employs about 5,000 people in India. So, and India is just one country, there's so many other countries that these are part of, right? So, how do you see the global nature also contributing to the ecosystem of startup in a way, if you'd say so?
Yeah, I mean it's a good point. A couple things. One is there's a lot of these bigger companies like Amazon that have a fund that invest in small companies and startups. So you have that. You're having them give back. Sometimes it's for their own purposes because they need that thing, and somebody's got a great idea. Let's invest in that because it's going to help us. But it's still, nevertheless, it's opening opportunity. The other thing is I'm partner with a group called Keiretsu Forum, which is a large, I think, if not the largest, one of the largest angel networks in the country. They go into 40 different countries. So when companies present through Keiretsu Forum, they have a reach not only throughout the United States, but they have a reach towards investors in other countries. So now you got capital coming in from other countries. So that's happening. We're also seeing there's some, with these new tariffs coming on, we're we're not sure what the end result's going to be like, but I've heard some folks in Canada and other countries are concerned because they might have a Canadian company and their biggest market is the US, and they're going to have to pay tariffs. How is that going to impact their business? And then they start considering, well, maybe we should invest or move our company to the US. So there's all these conversations happening because we don't know what we don't know until everything washes out.
Yeah, no, that's a good point you make, right? And it also brings me to the global nature of the world today, right? And the way I look at it is I'm not a big tech guy, but then I'm somebody who's more of a generalist. And the way I see it is, you have a city like Seattle, which has a direct flight to the UAE, to somewhere that can connect directly to India, and then so the distance between these countries is reduced a lot, and this is Asia I was talking about, right? And then you have Europe and other parts of East Asia, which are a lot more well connected here, right? So, uh, are startups here also thinking in that direction? Are they looking at maybe getting resources from that part of the world, or joint partnerships, or
Yeah, it's becoming very prominent. The number one thing for startups is how do we build this at a good cost and as lean as possible. And we're finding so much talent outside of the United States. So we have certain things in the United States we need to work with because they're very good at what they do and they're here. There's other resources that are very talented at a much better cost. Even our company Escalon, we leverage it. We're able to give bookkeeping and accounting and many other services, HR and payroll, things like that, back office work at a great rate because we have 300 U.S. employees and we have about 900 employees in India.
oh wow,
So we leverage the outsource, but there are employees, they're just outsourced. There are employees, they're our team, they're in India and they don't have to pay the wage that you pay in the US. So that's one area. Now we're seeing other companies using developers in Singapore or Brazil or China or other places. So yeah, it's become a global market. It's also become a global distribution, and also from an outsource or hiring perspective, you don't need someone to be here in the office, and they could be doing as good a work as anybody else from some other place.
yeah. And that model seems to be working in the corporate world, and I see, and even with your own company, right?
Yeah,
And I don't see any reason for it to not work in the startup world,
yeah.
right? So
In our case, our founders were from India, so it was a very natural thing to, as CFOs when they were building the business 25 years ago, to build up and get talent. There's India's a big place with a lot of people and a lot of talent. So you have, I think they said the numbers 1.4 million um, CPAs in the United States, and there's 3.8 million CPAs in India.
oh wow. I think there's another equivalent of CPA there, but
Yeah,
then yeah, you could be
yeah,
right. Yeah, yeah. Even the some of the bigger companies are also moving some of the finance accounting work, from what I've seen, right?
yeah.
How does Escalon play its role in this whole big startup ecosystem?
It's big. I think we're one of the largest, if not the largest, with what we do. We've got over 60 CFOs that we fractionalize out, and all different expertise. We've got consumer products. SaaS is our biggest delivery and team, and then we've got CFOs that are in Web3, crypto, media, metaverse types CFOs, and then we have we've got bioscience and life science. That's a biotech and life science. It's a big category for us, as well as I think I mentioned consumer products. So we've got a well-versed crew, and then we have specialist accountants, controllers, and bookkeepers that focus on those type of groups, including nonprofits is another big group of ours, growing group. So so that's one area. The other thing that happens a lot, we don't advertise this, but a lot of our CFOs and a lot of folks that are working with these businesses also work directly with venture capital, with the VCs. Obviously, if you're CFO, you're going to be in discussions with VCs for the businesses you're leading financially. So oftentimes, just by relationship, a company hires one of our CFOs, or hires our accounting, and our CFO introduces them to their main investor, just because it was a natural progression of our network. We've got a large network and a large network of partners.
Has there been any success stories that you can explain our audience?
In the venture back
Yeah,
world,
in the venture with
probably I couldn't tell you like specifics, like what VC and what CFO work with that, but But I would say there's a lot of success stories in the fact that we have companies that come to us and they can't get funded because their books are a mess, and they've never done their books. They've got spreadsheets. And then when we bring a CFO and bring our accounting team to come and build their books to proper financial, which is US GAAP financials, they now have a better opportunity of getting their funding. And it often happens within months of getting their books in order, having a CFO make sure that their financial model is exciting enough for someone to invest in. So we'll look for any gaps, and sometimes we rebuild the whole model. Then they go back out and meet with those same investors, and they're going, okay, now we see it. Now we see you have a budget. Now we see you have a forecast. We're ready to invest.
Yeah, that's so important, right? Especially, how a startup takes birth is, sometimes just with an idea or, a thought,
Yeah,
but then kind of how do you find that those other factors to make you successful? And funding is a big factor, right? And if there is a company or an ecosystem that can help, no better than that. But that brings me to my other topic right now. A lot of founders are, a bit inexperienced in the business world, getting funding. Where do I look? How do I look? What resources are available for them, and how do they even get started?
yeah. I think a big part of it is find folks like me to try to bring you into a relationship or an introduction to folks that can support you. There's all kinds of different support someone might need. They just might need uh, their bookkeeping done. They might need someone that can help with product development. They might need a key developer that they haven't met yet, or in many cases they need a co-founder because they're um, they're relying only on their ability. When with a co-founder or the right co-founder together, they become so much more. And that's another thing that a lot of the VCs are looking at as the leader. If the leader can't communicate properly or can't present properly or can't lead properly, is not really a CEO, great founder, great ideas, great innovation, but not a CEO, then the key for that, that if there's an interest in investment, is the encouragement, if not placement, of a co-founder who is a CEO, who can communicate and can lead and that kind of thing. So a lot of times I talk to founders, and I think for them a big part of what they should consider is who can be my co-founder, who can complement my skills. Like they may be good in code and development, but not as good in communications. Well, then let me get a co-founder that knows sales or that knows how to communicate our proposition in a better way than I can.
Is trust a very important factor in choosing your co-founder? Because sometimes a founder could have an idea, right, and then they want to keep it with themselves. They're a bit possessive about it. So is trust a big factor? What other qualities should you see in a co-founder?
Trust is a big factor in everything, any relationship, any business, anything. If trust isn't there, everything starts breaking down. So trust is absolutely important. So you have to build trust. You have to find someone you can trust. You make sure you have things in writing. I'm not an attorney, but there's a lot of good ones who can make sure, whether it's an NDA or other things to protect your intellectual property. But yeah, trust is huge, and you got to find someone that you can work with for the long term.
No, that's fascinating. And from your perspective, is a co-founder better in terms of if you know them before, like you have a established relationship with them in terms of like a colleague or a friend, or is it also okay to start afresh, right, and look for somebody where you have a more professional relationship where the boundaries are intact about the working relationship? How do you see that distinction?
It's a great question. I've seen co-founders that are family members that it was absolutely a big mistake. And I've seen co-founders that were friends, and it was an absolutely big mistake. It really comes down to talent and need. Like, who's the most talented? Who's the most talented co-founder? If it's somebody I know, yes, that's great because I already have a relationship and I also know how talented they are and I've seen them perform. So yeah, if you have that, then that's ideal. But a lot of times you don't. I've seen people because of the relationship think that it's going to work when really there's a lack of talent, lack of really cohesiveness and values sometimes because value alignment is important for co-founders. Um, is it about the money? Is it about the exit? Is it about the long-term success? There's all kinds of different values that founders have to talk through. So yeah, but at the end of the day, you want to find the most capable, and if they're in your network, great. But a lot of times it might be someone you haven't met yet.
So finding the right balance between your relationship on the personal side and then on the professional side, right? I think is the key from what I gather.
Well, yeah, because you even if you do find the right one, you're going to have to work through a lot. You're going to have to build a relationship and trust. But yeah, it's not automatically they're going to find someone that you know and have a relationship with that's going to be ultimately the best talent for you.
As somebody who's a big proponent of diversity and inclusion, have you seen a lot of female founders slash female co-founders in the Seattle area? And does that how has that been going?
So I am a big proponent of females, of women in leadership. I think they're fabulous in general, and and I think they've been discounted quite a bit. Still, there's a lot of movement towards opening that up, but it's still way behind. It's still way behind. I can't remember what the numbers are, but I think 4% of female founders get funded or something like that. Or I don't know the stat, but still a big gap. Um, I did a study years ago in South Africa. I spoke at a conference in South Africa probably 20 years ago, and I had come upon a study in South Africa on women CEOs, and the study was incredible. It showed women running circles around men in the way they handled the finances, the way they nurtured their employees, the way they gained followers because people trusted them and they were authentic, versus some of the other male founders were more ego and driven by control versus nurturing. And so there was a real there was it was impeccable. And I remember sharing this to a group, and the women were excited to hear the story. The guys didn't like it so much, especially when I said, a woman could lead any company and could lead this nation. This was 20 years ago in South Africa. The guys, I think they were ready to kill me or throw me off the stage. Thankfully, they didn't, but I wasn't afraid to tell the truth on what I was studying.
Yeah, I'm also seeing that. I was just out of graduate school last year, here in Seattle U, and I saw a lot of student women leaders in both the graduate school and undergraduate, right? And then that that is the base, right? If you're a leader in the school, then you ultimately become a leader in the community or the corporate world, right? So the future is definitely there, in that perspective. But yeah, thank you for advocating that, right?
Yeah.
Just coming back to the startup ecosystem, right? Now, from your lens, what areas or businesses are you seeing a lot of investor eyes in terms of looking at it and also in terms of putting actual money?
Well, there's AI, then there's AI, and then there's more AI. So AI is the big thing right now,
Yeah.
and but we're now noticing an uptick in robotics and in hardware. So there was there's some of the VCs would not touch hardware. It was oftentimes a losing a low margin losing battle. And I've heard just from a couple of VCs recently that no, we're and from an angel group, angel network. I partner with Alliance of Angels, and they said no, we're not turning away, because especially with AI driven hardware, it's really relevant. So that's happening. We still see, life sciences is always a fascinating vertical, and they take a little longer to develop, but once they hit it, they hit it really well. So there's still a lot of capital going into advanced health and other types of life sciences. So clean tech, um, a lot of those are getting funded. People care about the planet and care about resources and things like that. Ag tech. So yeah, it's kind of well rounded, but I think the biggest thing is AI. It's almost if it's got AI and it's got a unique solution that's going to grow and move quickly, those things are getting funded.
And how about the non-AI sectors, like some of the more traditional ones, right? And I used to work for Boeing. How about those industries, right? Which is manufacturing or the
Well,
old school industries, if I would say so.
well, the old school isn't so old school anymore. They're taking advantage of AI.
Okay.
Most of them have the resources to begin to shift their operations to greater efficiencies, and AI is going to be a big part of that. So I don't think that's going to harm the big guys as they utilize AI in their operations, whether it's manufacturing and things like that. Obviously, consumer products is a lot of VCs won't touch consumer products oftentimes, but if it's a good product and it's gonna you know be a big deal in multiple channels, those things will get funded too.
Oh, that's great to hear. I always like asking this question to guests. So let me take you back 20 years, right? So I mean, in terms of age, not timeline. So what, let's say you were a 25-year-old today, right out of college. What industry or what domain would you be most fascinated in, or want to get your career or start a company in?
I'd start with AI and maybe look at some other AI, and then AI. If I look back, I mean, I'm just fascinated with what's happening. Um, but there's all kinds of stuff. The biggest thing is what's your passion,
Mm-hmm.
right? If your passion is robotics or passion is, life sciences and developing the next cure for whatever, or the next, then you got to go, number one, you got to go with what your heart says versus what everyone says, right? You got to listen to your heart. But obviously AI tech, and SaaS is always going to be a big, big wave. But I would say go with your gut, go with what you're passionate about, and you're probably not going to go wrong.
Yeah. And the way I see you saying it, like, with the answer AI, AI. So AI is essentially the backbone for everything now, right? So, you could have a passion, want to build something in anything, but then you have to have a basic understanding of AI. Is that correct?
You're right. It's going to be it's obviously going to be kind of laced into almost everything, the way things are heading. So um, not to give up on the brick and mortar. Yeah, they've taken a big hit, and they're not going to get VC capital for a lot of them. But those service industries are still going to be, people are going to need them. They need someone to build our homes and change our homes, and fix things, and so the and plumbing and all that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that's still out there that may be generational businesses that you grew up in, or that you may have an opportunity in. I wouldn't I wouldn't I wouldn't put those down either. I have family that owns restaurants, and they've taken their hits on trying to get staffing and things like that. And so, my cousin Vince of Vince's Italian Restaurants, um, he still loves it, and people love him, love the restaurants, love the food, and they're doing well. So I don't put down any of those businesses that aren't necessarily needing VC funding to be successful.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting point. Right now, I want to go back to one of my favorite topics, and you are the godfather of networking, right?
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people think that networking is knowing people, but the way I look at it is no, it's not just knowing people. What is your advice to people who want to start or taking initial steps for networking, right?
Yeah, I think it's well, it is kind of, and it's a sense of getting to know people, but the biggest thing for networking is to be available, showing up. Really, one of the things that people see is that Rob, you guys, you're here, you're there, you're everywhere. My wife used to say, being married to Rob is like holding on to Superman's cape because he's here, and she'll tug on the cape sometimes and put me, ground me, which I need sometimes. But yeah, it's showing up, it's being available, it's willing to be uncomfortable for some, because some people are introverts. My wife's a introvert, so going into a big network meeting for her is not fun. I invite her all the time. She doesn't like to go. Certain ones she'll go to because it seems fun for her or whatever. But for me, I get energized. For some people that are extroverts, they get energized. But there's I've seen introverts that have done very well because they've adapted. They know that if I'm going to be successful, even though I'm more of a on not naturally that way, I'm going to go out there and be uncomfortable, and I'm going to meet people, and and they're having success.
No, being uncomfortable is such a good point, right? And I was new into the city, right, when I came here in 2022, and there were a lot of times when I used to go to events alone, right? And then the first 15 minutes would be really awkward, right? You don't know anybody, and then slowly you start
Yeah,
getting into
you
the
start out against the wall, a
yeah,
wallflower, and then you start blooming, coming out.
yeah. How important is removing fear of failure in your opinion? Because a lot of times you could reach out to people, right? And not get the response you want. So
Yeah,
how important is that?
that's a great point. I learned that as a young age. I did well with the idea of rejection. I used to knock on doors, sell candy, and newspapers and other things, and you get a lot of rejection. But what I hoped for, and which I received, was the one yes. I'd go through 30 no's and get the one yes. Boom, ka-ching! I got some money in my pocket. So the same thing with networking. You're going to get out there. You're going to stumble. You're going to feel awkward. You're going to, did I say the right thing? You're going to overthink things. Did I say
Yeah,
the right thing? Did I approach them the right way? Did I interrupt them? So you have all these ideas, but the truth is you'll get better at it. You just got to go do it. And the bottom line is, if you don't do it, what happens? Well, nothing happens. So you have to have that. The pain of not doing it has to be so great that you end up uh, doing it regardless of how uncomfortable it is, and you get better at it.
yeah,
It's just something you get better at.
yeah. And and trust me, I don't have a lot of experience as you do, but the little I've seen of even big leaders, executive leaders, it's not easy for them to, networking and putting themselves out there. So even for somebody younger, they don't have to feel that way, right? That if I'm going out there, how am I looking? Sometimes it's just you have to just put yourself out there, right?
Yeah.
And mistakes will happen. But like you said, I think showing up, that word you used, right? Showing up, that's so important, right? Simple thing like, let's say I met you for the first time at an event, and then we exchange contacts and we fix a time to have coffee next week, Friday, 3:30. Coming there next week, Friday, 3:30, that is such a big first step in my opinion, right? You build that trust. Oh, he wants me, or they want me, and that is such a good first step from what I've seen, right? And not a lot of people understand the value of that showing up.
Showing up is a big deal, but also how you show up. Um, there's this idea, nobody wants to be sold, right? They want to be served, and they want to know that you care. So so part of my success is I show up with and try not to have an agenda because I want to hear what their needs might be. May not be they need Escalon, but they might need one of my partners who's a banker or an attorney or a VC or whoever I'm partnering with. Um, and so I come in curious. If you remain curious, you're going to learn a lot more. You're also coming in with big ears, listening, and really not coming to pitch or sell or whatever agenda. So try to come without an agenda, except one agenda is I want to get to know this person, and hopefully they get to know me, because that opens trust. And then there can be an agenda because you find some common ground or things to work on. Then there's an agenda. But the nice thing is you start with relationship. If the agenda fails, it doesn't matter. We're friends, and that's what I try to approach everything towards being a friend. And then if there's something that I can serve them with, then we can talk about it.
That is such a great advice, right? And I mean, you're also widening your horizon that way. You're not boxing that person in a category, right? When you're saying I'm building a relationship, you're so widening your
Yeah,
horizon, right? Another point you talked about is people don't like getting sold, and this is something that we see often in LinkedIn, right? That people don't like getting sold. And as somebody who has 30,000 followers on LinkedIn and fairly popular, if I would say so, how do you build relationships on LinkedIn? Because it's a great tool, right? And I think we met at an event, but I think we first connected over a LinkedIn message and then set up a meeting, if I'm not wrong. So
yeah. I think the biggest thing. Well, I'll tell you what you don't do. You don't send a robot out to send a message to somebody, asking them if they need what they already do. Like I don't know how many people come to me and ask if I need accounting or HR or all the stuff that Escalon does. And I sometimes I just don't respond because I know it's just somebody not paying attention, or they're sending somebody else to send emails out or LinkedIn messages. But there's a couple times I respond and go, "Have you even looked at what I do? Like, do you care what I do? And have you looked at what I do?" So what you don't want to do is sell over LinkedIn. You want to approach people with the idea of possibly a meeting. If you see someone that hey, they're interesting, or maybe it could be someone that you can be a customer one day. Talk about maybe some people you know in common. Talk about some interest that you've discovered or you studied on their LinkedIn that they like, that you like. Be authentic, and then build, see if you can build a relationship with them. Not everyone's open, but most people are fairly approachable if you come with that authenticity.
no, yeah, I think doing that research, like you said, on that person and also being authentic, right? Does commenting on LinkedIn help? Because I've read some people say that commenting is a good way of staying engaged, right? And they have built a relationship going from there.
Read some of their what they've wrote, comment on it, and before you even approach them, they've already seen your name several times liking their stuff. That's a good approach. I mean, authentically like their stuff. If you like what they're saying and you comment because you like what they're saying, that opens the door to them knowing or remembering you. But the other thing is, don't there's people that come in. I'm trying to extend my network. Okay, great. What does that mean? Like, so you just want me to connect because extend your network, you know?
Yeah,
So or I find you interesting, and maybe there's ways for us to. Well, how I want to. I keep asking, well, how do you see us partnering? Because sometimes I'll see what they do, and I'll go, I don't see how. What do we have in common? You know,
yeah,
other than they're selling investments or something,
yeah,
and they
yeah.
want me as a client. So have an idea of why. There's got to be a big why.
Mhm.
You know, like why should we meet? What would be cool about us meeting? That's important versus just, hey, can we have coffee together? But there's got to be an answer to the why. What's the purpose of it? Building relationships is a good purpose, but is there even a relation, something beyond that, an interest or something that we can move towards in conversation? Those are important.
Yeah. So the why, the purpose, and then quality over quantity, if I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes, I learned this years ago, having a valid business reason. If you really want to approach somebody in business, have a valid business reason. Not, and the valid business reason isn't because you're trying to sell them something. The valid business reason is you found out that they just lost 3 of their staffing and you maybe have a solution for them. Then you might be able to approach them with that idea because you've discovered something that you might be able to provide a solution for. So that's a valid business reason to connect if you're looking for from a business perspective. But overall, I find people interesting, and I find a key about them that's interesting that opens the door to connecting.
Yeah. With that, thank you so much, Robert, for your time today. It was
Yeah,
a pleasure talking to you,
yeah.
and also this great
Little
location.
view.
Yeah, yeah,
It's pretty cool. You can look down at the Space Needle. Space Needles in Seattle is known as one of the tallest places, and we're looking at the top of it from the Columbia Tower. So it's pretty cool.
And how high is this? The tallest building in Seattle?
Yeah, tallest building in Seattle, and we're about 900 feet up.
Oh, wow.
And the
Yeah,
Space Needle is about 660, I think, feet up.
got it.
And plus, we're on a little bit of a hill, so it gives us even more of a
Incline.
incline. Yeah,
Yeah, I
so
also see Mount Rainier out there, so
yeah,
it's kind of still.
it's nice to be able to see Mount
Yeah,
Rainier in the winter.
yeah.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure, and looking forward to our relationship going forward. And anything I can do to serve you or anybody watching this, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you again, Robert, for your time, and wish you the best with all three and more of your hats
Yeah,
right here.
all 15 of my hats.
Yeah, thank you.
You got it. Good
Yeah.
seeing you.